Don't quit your day job to become a content creator, YouTuber, blogger, whatever, without hearing me out first. I quit my day job, my very steady, pretty well paying, could have been my forever grown up 9-to-5 job 2.5 years ago to become an influencer. And there's just so much I wish I would have known going into it. So I wanted to make this very detailed video about what you need to know before deciding to quit your job to pursue content creating full time. Like, this is going to be a lesson. Class is in session. Sit down, break out your pen and paper, be ready to take notes, and if you don't have the time or space to commit right now, definitely save it to come back later, because this is serious. We're gonna break this down into 3 parts. First, knowing when or whether it's a good time to quit your day job, some reality checks for what full-time content creation is really like, and third, if you truly decide to do this, to quit your 9-to-5. I want to end on some considerations to make the transition more strategic. So without further ado, how do you know it's time to take content creating full-time? Well, this is going to come down to how risk adverse you are and where you currently are at in your business. Let's look at my own checklist, things that I had going for me that drove me to put in my notice at work. First, my content creating income had finally matched my day job's yearly salary, and I had locked down enough long-term partnerships and relationships for the next year to know that I was on the right trajectory to make that income again. And I had enough history in my business to show that I was growing year over year, which left me pretty confident that I would be okay. I also had a lot of strong contacts at big companies. I think people really underestimate the power of networking, but your contacts can make or break your career. In the content creating space, a lot of the time, your main contacts are going to be at PR agencies, the people who act as like a middleman between you and the brand, which usually means you don't have a direct relationship with the people at these big companies. For example, I've had the opportunity of working with like CoverGirl and Tresemme and Clorox and Pine Sol, but for all of those brands, I actually don't have the direct email address of somebody who works there. I only have the middleman PR contact, which means my link to those brands and potential for future work with them is a little bit flimsy. But in the last year before I took content creating full time, I managed to connect more directly with the decision makers behind the scenes at these big brands, which made me feel a little bit more secure and in control of the longevity of my relationships with these brands. Before quitting my job, I also had a lot of affirming opportunities. I started to get opportunities outside of like the standard brand deal that sort of confirmed that I was on the right track. I got special opportunities to work with Pinterest and with Google. I got featured in news articles and invited on podcasts. I also had a network, albeit a pretty small one at the time, of fellow content creators. Coworkers in a sense who knew the industry and that I could talk with, bounce ideas off of. I also had more than one income stream, although they were honestly pretty weak. In addition to like brand deals, I also had a digital product and was seeing a bit of income from my blog and affiliate links. And a huge one is that I had no other responsibilities. No kids, no mortgage, no car. Okay, wait, that's not completely fair. My husband actually had just quit his job like a year prior to go back to school to become a teacher. And so I did have the responsibility of like our rent and all of our bills. Like, content creating did have to cover our life, but I still think that responsibility is a lot less than like, you know, a mortgage and like other large expenses. So that was my own checklist, but I think the biggest thing when making your own decision is doing that calculated risk assessment and taking the time to write down how many of your own safety nets you have and see if you have enough safety nets to make it worth the risk. Because everything I listed for myself was a safety net in some sense. Maybe you don't have a like proof of concept. You don't have the income to prove that this works, but maybe you have a partner who is willing to cover everything. Maybe you have a lot of savings. The risk doesn't seem so big. On the other hand, if you have a lot of responsibilities and you don't have the safety net of past income or somebody else to fall back on, you might have to wait to quit your day job until you've proven to yourself that you can make the amount of money that you need to survive. Circling back to my own checklist, you can see that I am probably a little bit more risk adverse than others. So now on to the reality checks. It's important to set our expectations on what working for yourself as a creative entrepreneur is really like. That way we can decide whether or not that's something we're actually up for. First, if you are considering self-employment, I hope you've seen the meme, I quit my 9-to-5 so I could work 24/7. It's not a joke. There is just no work-life balance or boundaries when you are self-employed, especially as a content creator. Not always, but generally your income is matched by how much work you put in. And it's really hard to take rest without feeling like you're sleeping on your business. You want to take it slow and easy one month, your income is going to slow down too unless you have the right systems in place, which I'm noticing a lot of creators don't have. There's also a really interesting pressure to feel creative on demand. When content creating is happening off the side of your desk, you definitely have a lot more flexibility. You can work when you feel inspired and motivated and not feel the pressure to put something out just because you have to. And then when you do actually feel creative, you have to be careful about how much you're experimenting, because the reality is, especially on a platform like YouTube, where your audience has specific expectations about the type of content they subscribed for, doing something too out of the box or too far outside of their expectations can jeopardize your views and therefore your income, whether that is in the Google AdSense income or in brand opportunities when they look at your page and your views are super inconsistent video to video. When you create content full time, it's really easy to fall into this trap of just doing what works because you have to. And I think that's something that leads to a lot of burnout. And that's another thing. Burnout is incredibly rampant among the full-time content creator space. Oh, the sun is setting out there. So let's keep it moving. Next, content creating can be very isolating. As much as people think it's a job for the extroverts, the industry is actually made up of a lot of introverts sitting in their home talking to the camera and then editing in a dark little room for hours. And I think a lot of people really underestimate how much of their socializing they get done in their workplace. All of the little banter you have with your coworkers, these people who often get to know you on a pretty deep level because you usually see them more than you see your own family, all of that disappears when you are self-employed. You now have to take a lot of initiative to not feel lonely, to reaching out to other creators, to create a network, go to events, and just meet and talk to other people. This is something I would especially consider if you are a single person and maybe you don't live somewhere where there is a huge content creator community or a community of creatives or self-employed people. Because I really think that working alone as a creator can get to you. Like it can make or break your sanity. And then a reality check just on the logistics level is your pay and consistency. Net 30s, net 60s, net 90s are all real things in this industry. You can do the work for a brand and not get paid until 90 days after you've posted it. As people running our own businesses, it is really important to try to challenge this when you can, but I find that ironically, the bigger the brand you work with, the more systems they have in place, the longer it's gonna take to get paid. The little mom and pop shop I work with will pay me before I've even created the content. Whereas not gonna name any names, but worked with some big brands that have just taken so long because they just say that's how their accounts payable works. Sorry. And little old me is not gonna be able to fight that system. Also, just in general, the unpredictability of your income as a self-employed person. Brand deals truly come in seasons. Some months are gonna be really good and some not so much. You have to ask yourself if your responsibilities and your bills can handle that type of fluctuation, and also if your stress levels can. Looking just at my year this year, and this is what I got paid out, not what contracts I got in. In January, I had a $3,500 month, February a $5,000 month, March, a $12,000 month. Back down to April, $6,000, May, $7,000, June, $3,000. And that is not out of the norm. That also makes it hard to do any type of long-term planning as a creator. If you have a bi-weekly paycheck, it's really easy to plan big purchases, any travel, or any other type of like big life changes because you know what you're going to be receiving month after month. If you want to put something big on your credit card, you know how many weeks it's going to take for you to pay it down. There is none of that type of predictability in full-time content creation. Another reality check that I had, and will probably be the same for anybody who is working their full-time salary job and already making like a full-time-ish salary from their creative venture. When you quit your job, you are going from 2 incomes to 1. So I went from making between my 2 jobs like 150K to like 75, 80K the next year. The year that I was making those like 2 incomes, I wasn't stressing about money. So just know, like, even though it makes sense, like we know that we are losing income while quitting our day job, weirdly enough, like the further you are in your creator business, the more it might hurt to lose your day job's income. I don't know if that makes sense, but if you're just starting as a creator and you're quitting your job as a way to like test if this can really work and if you can make money, I feel like you're more mentally prepared for the sacrifice and to live lean. But when your business is already at like a full-time salary level and you're making 2 full-time salaries, unless you're crazy efficient and strategic, you might not like double your self-employment income to make up for the loss of your day job's income. That actually brings me to another reality check. Not enough people talk about it. I've seen 2 other people talk about it. The weird transition and mourning and like depression that you might slide into upon quitting your day job. I've had a couple of friends who have gone through this themselves. I experienced this. I think that we have all of these expectations that like when we quit our day job, we're going to be like 20 times more productive on our side venture. But we're processing a lot of things in this transition. One for me was like all of this new pressure I put on myself after being full-time. I went from just comparing myself to people who approach content as a side hustle to other full-time content creators, and that comparison really got to me. And there's also this like huge decompression that your body does when you finally allow it to breathe. Like I went from working my day job at 7 in the morning till 2 p.m., getting home and then like working from 3 p.m. to like midnight, sometimes later in the night, to work on my content creating deadlines. And in a way, even though I was very busy and I loved what I was doing, I was kind of operating on survival mode. And so our body does this thing where when we don't need to be in survival mode anymore, it just crashes and it wants to rest. And it's like recuperating from all this time that it had to be on. And that can be really jarring when you just quit your day job with all these expectations, but you like can't get out of bed. I don't know, personally, it took me like a month or 2 to get out of that funk. And I think there's also these other elements at play where our identity is so wrapped up in what we do. And especially as like I quit my job at like 29, we're grown-ups, people have kids and all these things. And when I used to say what I did for my day job, where I worked as a facilities coordinator at a research institute for the Children's Hospital, even if nobody knew what that meant or what I did, they were like, she's a professional, she's a grown-up, she's got a pension, she's got responsibilities, I respect her. Flipping that to after quitting my day job, saying any type of semblance of like content creator, influencer, blogger, YouTuber, whatever, just did not get that level of respect, which was something I expected. But again, I think it was just really interesting, like a loss of like self and identity. Like even though I personally didn't see my day job as my identity, like other people, the external world does and did, it was just a weird thing to process. When you quit your day job, you're gonna process a lot of emotions and you're gonna have the time to have all of these thoughts and emotions, ones that maybe you were pushing away. Okay, so you're still set on it. Quitting your day job, your 9 to 5. Or in my case, it was actually a 6 to 2, but nonetheless. First, decide your timeline. 2 weeks can be really tempting to give, but unless you had like an incredible 6-figure year, it's probably a good idea to give yourself a little bit more of a buffer of income and time to strategize this move accordingly. But also, to be fair, it is easy to keep extending it as a way to just put off taking the dive. I gave 6 months notice for 2 reasons. One, I had a lot of responsibility at my job and I thought that that would give them enough time to find a replacement and train them, but we didn't really end up doing that till like month 5 anyways. And then the person quit and I ended up coming back as a contractor to train the next person. But reason 2 that I put in that much time was that I was hoping to make a really strong game plan for full-time creative entrepreneurship. But in reality, I only executed a fraction of what I had planned. So be realistic. And here are some things I would consider doing before making the leap. 1, get your business investments over with. That gear that you've been eyeing or software that you think will increase your efficiencies or allow you to level up in your business, buy it now while you have 2 incomes, or at least like 1 good steady one. Next, diversify your income and your presence. We talked earlier about the amount of safety nets we have, and having diverse income streams and being present on multiple platforms, having your own blog, a YouTube channel, Instagram, email list, all of that makes it so that you are more secure when you strike out on your own. Next, try to build up the best you can long-term partnerships. I actually have a whole video on this here, but having long-term partnerships will do wonders for a little bit more predictability in your income. I think when I quit my day job, I had 4 different long-term partnerships signed for the entire year. So I knew at the very least that I could expect a baseline of income at a semi-regular interval. Also, take the time to focus on what pays. This is something that I'm personally quite bad at. I tend to be a bit more of a follow your heart and your creativity type of girl, but when you are responsible for your entire livelihood, you have to focus on what makes money. Whether that means focusing on particular formats that you know are going to get a lot of views and therefore a lot of income, or maybe focusing on Instagram because the brand deals are more frequent there than they are over on your blog. Next, focus on building your network. Actively network. Do not be a lone wolf. This will be crucial not just for as I've talked about, maintaining a good mental space, but also for just getting more opportunities. Get active on platforms where conversations are happening. At one point that used to be Twitter, now it seems like Threads is more useful for this. And don't be afraid to shoot your shot to other creators who are kind of at the same level career-wise as you. Whether that's people who seem like they might be going full-time soon or have recently done so. And just on a practical level, get your finances in order. Work on separating your business income from your personal income. As a Canadian, it didn't make a lot of sense for me to incorporate my business, but I did operate as a sole proprietorship, and I opened a business account accordingly with my own business credit card to try to just keep my finances as clean as possible. And also, before you quit, please make sure you understand your tax situation, whatever country you're in, or province or state or whatever. Just make sure you understand your responsibilities and how much you're actually going to be taking home at the end of the day. And finally, the sun has fully set. I just want to end on some words of encouragement. If you have assessed everything, you've made the calculated risk, and hello, I guess you were a responsibility I had to feed you. You're so heavy. Oh, okay. If you have assessed everything, you've made a calculated risk, and if your calculations are sound, have faith that you did your due diligence. Remember that if you've made it this far as a creator, that you have a vast skill set. You can always get into something else if this career path doesn't work for you. You can be a video editor, you can work in marketing, you can go down the path of social media management. There's a lot that you can do in both the freelancing and more traditional corporate space. And also, if you do change your mind, that doesn't mean you failed. You just changed your mind. Having the courage to do your own thing is huge. And I think it's really easy to let other people's voices get in your head. People who have no idea what this industry is really like. I know when I put in my notice, a lot of people thought I was crazy. They didn't understand all of the risk assessment that I had personally done. They didn't understand that I had already been making good money. They didn't know the full extent of all the opportunities I had and the different relationships that I had built. So yeah, if you think you're ready, trust the process, go in with reasonable expectations, and I hope the other videos I have on this channel can help you along your journey. And if nothing else, as somebody to relate to.